Hello and welcome to Peek a Book. It's been a while since I actually did a review of a book, so I thought it's high time. I got around to doing something, and I've been reading a lot of books, fortunately, although I haven't been recording reviews because I've been busy. And I feel very fortunate that I was able to make a bit of a reading habit. To start with, let me talk about this book. It's called Plays Well with Others by Eric Barker. It's kind of a light non-fiction book, which is really in the realm of behavioral science, which is a very popular kind of genre. He really talks about four things in this book. Really, he talks about how the first thing is whether you can judge a book by its cover, in the sense that can you actually judge people without knowing them very deeply. Some people, including myself, I feel that I'm a pretty good, I read people very well, especially in terms of the first impressions that I have. And he talks particularly about first impressions. So, and it turns out that yes, first impressions can be fairly accurate, but like 30-40% of the time we could be wrong. It's not really about whether we're right or wrong. It's really about making sure that we put enough effort into making those judgments, because sometimes when you make first impressions, after that it's very difficult to change your mind, because then biases start to creep in. So confirmation biases will creep in, and many other biases. There's literally tens and hundreds of biases, not hundreds, but definitely tens and over 100 biases that are noted that we have in our decision making and thinking processes. So it's important that if you make, if a first impression has left you with an understanding of a person, that you kind of make sure that you put enough effort into understanding that judgment. It's kind of filled with that kind of analysis. So like I said, the first subject is, can you judge a book by its cover? The second subject is really about friendship. Friend in need is a friend in need, and what are friendships and what's the structure of friendships and so on and so forth. The third one is, can love conquer everything? And it's really a kind of deeper understanding of love, and whether what love is, and what, for example, its role in marriages and so on and so forth, which by the way has changed over time. It wasn't always that marriages were meant to be, love was supposed to be a part of marriage. In fact, for a large part of time it was supposed to actually interfere with the institution of marriage. It was too risky to leave such an important institution like marriage to the vagaries of love, essentially. So very interesting. So he kind of explores that subject, and finally he explores a subject which he calls No Man is an Island. It's really about relationships and can you exist on your own, and the difference between loneliness and solitude and so on and so forth. So it's very interesting. He's kind of crafted the book really well, and there's a big sprinkling of humor throughout the book, so you kind of enjoy reading it. It's not too taxing. But the one reason that I want to recommend this book to everybody is that it's filled with a lot of anecdotes. And those anecdotes are really great stories. I made some notes here because, my memory is not what it used to be. So, Plays Well with Others, great stories, I've noted some. There's one about Hans the horse, which is basically about this very famous horse. I think, I'm not really sure of the time period, but he was considered this miracle horse who could do mathematics, and he kind of became a big thing, and people would flock to see him and stuff like that. And it turned out ultimately that the horse actually didn't know how to count. He was just looking at the person who was standing next to him and kind of getting cues, tiny signals from that person about whether they were happy with the answer that he was giving. So he would kind of count up to 6 and suddenly detect that this human being was feeling quite happy that this horse has reached the right answer, and he would stop. And so 3 plus 3 would result in 6 and so forth. So that's a beautiful story. It's like fun. I've heard this before somewhere, and the thing is, some of these stories are familiar, some of them are not. And one of my favorite stories in this entire book is about this soccer star. I think his name was Carlos Kaiser, and he had a 20-year career, and he managed to entirely kind of fictionalize his own heroicism and fame in the sport, because he never played a single professional match, and he played for 20 years for different clubs and kind of gathered quite a reputation. He managed to do this by being very pally with some of his famous teammates who would recommend him, because he would know all the party spots in town and kind of be just good buddies with them and all that. And every time he got signed on to a club, he'd feign an injury. And once he kind of and by the way, he'd pay people to be in the stands and scream his name and stuff like that. So people thought that he was a big star. So he kind of made this impression about being a big star without actually playing a single soccer match. Now this guy is clearly somebody right after my own heart. I would love to do this. It's kind of filled with such stories. There's some other stories about a female Sherlock Holmes. There's that whole story which was made into an Adam Sandler movie, 50 First Dates. There's the story about placebos and how they work, and somebody who did research, and the fact that placebos work itself was something that people were missing. There's this story about the Pfizer drug, which we all know about, which is called Viagra, and how initially Pfizer was pretty prudish about bringing that drug to market, and of course it's become one of the most profitable drugs for them ever, kind of thing. So all these things are scattered and sprinkled through the book, so it makes it really, really interesting to read. My only complaint with this book is that by the end of it, there's so much scattered all through, and some of these topics are so generic that it's very difficult to come away with a strong thesis. There's a very interesting part here where he talks about how to detect liars. Apparently, all of us are pretty bad at it because the liars get a lot of practice. They're lying all the time, whereas we only meet them once or twice, and so we can't detect the lie. He talks about friendships and why they're so successful is really because they don't have a formalized institution. It's 100% voluntary. Friends don't require, they're not. You don't have to go to court and sign the friendship degree or whatever it is. So at some level it's a complex relationship, but very important obviously in our lives. But the strength that it derives is because there is no formality around the relationship. So things like that. Very interesting stuff, but the danger this book has is that you kind of assimilate some of the things and a few scattered facts and then quickly forget it. Unlike Thinking Fast and Slow, which almost became like thesis for how you should think and how you should make decisions. So that's really my thing with this book. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this review, please put down your comments, show me some love, and keep coming back.